Okay, welcome to the last part of this lesson, lecture 2. And in this part, we'll be having a look at to the web attacks that are related to web application. Why web application? Why not some other application? Because it is the most commonly used application out there in the world. So let's just have a look at to some common, um attacks or terminologies or threats associated with web application. So first of all, the buffer overflow. We already did the buffer overflow. So every application out there, they have a buffer associated with it. Why would they need a buffer or a memory? Memory or buffer is the same thing, okay? But the program memory, not the operating system memory. So what they did was, what they do is the whenever they need some data to be processed, they save it in their buffer and then they move on. Fine. Now, if the data that it is expecting, or the input that it is expecting, that application is is beyond its capacity of the buffer, it has to store it somewhere. Fine. So in that case, we say that it has overflowed the buffer. So it, whatever it can accommodate, it has accommodated, and then the rest of the data is being sent somewhere else. Fine. Now the buffer, if the buffer is full, the program usually cannot properly behave. So you might mess around with the functionality as an attacker, mess around with the functionality of the buffer overflow. Now also, sometimes when the attacker has a good idea about the application memory, what they do is that they send out a particular code. Fine. And that code actually push some data into the application buffer, and they know that whenever the buffer is full, it will actually point to a particular memory in the application. So what they do is that they put their own malicious code into that new memory, which is outside that buffer. So whenever they push that code, the program buffer actually gets full, it is overflowed. Fine. And the rest of the data actually now points to a new location where the malicious code of the attacker is residing. So when it goes there, the control is actually passed through the malicious code, and it becomes active, and then it will infect whatever is the design of that code. So this is known as a buffer overflow attack. Client side attack. There are two types of attacks in general. One is a server side attack and the other is a client side attack. In server side attack, it has nothing to do with the server or the client, okay? But it's just another way of defining, categorizing attacks. In a server side attack, the the attacker actually directly from him as a source, he tries to target a particular victim, a particular, either a server or a person or an application, whatever it is, or a PC. So he is directly involved in the he himself starts the attack and then attacks the target. The target is not actively involved in the attack itself, right? But in the client side, what happens is that you as an attacker actually infect the client or the target in general, not client, in target in general. Fine. We also, in these terms, we call it the client. So first of all, he is infected in some way. Fine. The target is infected, and once it is infected, it starts to, then the attacker actually downloads the files from here, downloads or steals the information from here. So we call this as a client side attack, in which the client is actually acting as a server. The client is actually acting as a server by providing services. Services here is what? Offering data to the attacker. This is called a client side attack. Then we have header manipulation. You already know that all web-based communication is being performed through HTTP, right? And HTTP is a packet which has a header and a payload. HTTP request header, HTTP response header. So here what the attacker does is that he changes the header information of the HTTP packet, which includes normally a malicious code. Fine. And when it is being received by a particular server or a client, it then infects it, because he has to, that server or client has to process the HTTP header, right? So when it process the HTTP header, there is this malicious code, it activates and it infects that target. Where is it? I will get back to this one later. I will do all these three in one. Malicious ad zone. These days everyone is, your browser, for example, it's not just a browser anymore. You can add other extensions to it. For example, your Google Meet extension, maybe some other ad blocker extension, maybe some dictionary extension that you attach, or we call them ad zone. Other functionalities that you add to your browser, right, to make it more functional. Now chances are that these ads on might be malicious. Fine. So when you attach them, when you connect them, or when you may install them into your browser, fine, it might infect your browser. Now depending upon the design of that malicious code, of that malicious add-on, you can imagine what can be done with your internet traffic, your browser communication. Fine. Now LDAP injection, SQL injection, and XML injection. Fine. I don't know whether you know SQL, structured query language. It is a query language in which, let's just say, this is one example. You will say select, this is one of the SQL query, select asterisk from students where student ID is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is an SQL query, right? Usually this is how database application work. So let's just say that the HOD has the privilege to get the information of all the students. So the application that he is using, the database application that he is using, there will be a button which will say show all students, fine, or show students with this. There will be a form. What do you call this? A text input area where you can actually search for a particular student, or maybe all students. So the what the HOD will do is that he will put the 1, 2, 3, 4 ID here, and then he will search the hit the search button. This is the magnifier, right? And in the background, that application will send this query, which we call an SQL query, to the database management system, fine, to extract all information from the students table where the ID of the student is 1, 2, 3, 4. So HOD will be displayed with all the information, the age, the phone number, semester GPA, cumulative GPA of that particular student. This is called as this is known as SQL query, right? We also have, coming back to the injection part, we also have servers that are authenticating users remotely. Fine, that are authenticating user. There are plenty of different mechanisms. One is LDAP, the other is called Kerberos. Fine, the one that we are using in our systems are actually in our SQL is Kerberos. But there is another protocol that is used for authenticating users to the main server, and that is called Lightweight Directory Access Protocol, LDAP. Fine. So in LDAP, you will be in LDAP based communication authentication. The user will be presented with a login interface, username and password. Fine. When he enter this one, the respective information will be converted to something like this, but in the form of LDAP particular query, and that query will be taken to the LDAP server, where it will be authenticating, confirming whether this is the right information or not. If it is the right information, he will allow access. In both the cases, there is a particular string that has been sent to the server. Here it is sent in LDAP. The string or the query is in the form of LDAP formatted string, and it is sent to the LDAP server. Fine, authentication server. Here the query is in the form of SQL query, and it is sent to a database server. Here in XML, again the same thing. The user input is converted into XML, and it is sent to some kind of an XML based server. Fine, whether the respective response is being given to the user. Fine, for different purposes. Now, this is the usual thing. But what the attacker does is that they use injection. Injection and query is the same thing. Fine. So we call them query when a legitimate application or a legitimate administrator is providing it. We call it a query, LDAP query, we call it XML query, we call it SQL query. But if someone is doing it with the unintentionally, fine, he is manipulating these queries. We call it that he is actually injecting queries into the respective databases through those applications. Fine. So let's just say that the attacker, the attacker has an access to this interface which the HOD was using. Fine. But he doesn't know what are the IDs. Fine. Now he wants to let's just say it's called provide ID. Fine. He has access to this interface, but he doesn't know all these IDs. So what will he do? He will manipulate these queries. He will say 1 is equal to 1. For example, this is one of the example. Now, in the background, when you hit enter here, this is called now an injection, SQL injection. Fine. We are talking an example of the SQL injection. So this is now an injection. So how will this work? It will be formatted by the database application as what? Select asterisk from students where ID is equal to 1 is equal to 1. Which means that this is always true, right? Because it has to process it. Now 1 is equal to 1 is always true, right? So what will it do? It will be displaying all the information, all the student information to the attacker out there. Now, generally speaking, to make it more easy for you, simple for you, these are strings, either LDAP, SQL, and XML. These are strings which we call injections, and these injections are actually strings are used by the attackers to manipulate querying the respective servers. When they have successfully manipulated all these queries and they are successfully executed by the respective server, they will get the respective information, right? Which is not intended for them at all. That's why if it was intended for them, they might have used proper information. But they are using these cheat you will find SQL cheat sheet in your or the internet. They are using these strings which normally people do not provide. They usually provide the student IDs or proper information. Fine. So these are either these are examples or explanation. If you still don't understand, let me know. Let me do it again for you. Depending upon the server, whether it is an authentication LDAP server, whether it is a database SQL server, or it is some kind of an XML based server, Java based server, right? The objective here of the attacker is to come up with a string, fine, and there are plenty of strings out there that will actually manipulate the respective query that is supposed to go to a particular server, either LDAP server, SQL server, or XML server. Fine. And if there is no proper checking of these strings on the server or in the application, fine, it will be processing the request. If they are true, they will be presented with the respective information. They will be authenticated to the server, to the machines. Fine. Now, what is a countermeasures? So until now we have talked about only bad things, right? We have threats, we have vulnerabilities, we have these actors, we have these attacks and all those things. But do we have anything to protect ourselves with? Yes, in general, that defense mechanism is called a countermeasure. You counter a particular problem, security problem, or a particular threat with it. Fine. So it is an action that is taken to safeguard, to protect assets against potential threats or attacks. Fine. Why is this not, it's not showing it here? But usually what we do is to, first of all, these countermeasures, we must, there are three types of countermeasures. Fine, there are three kinds. So it is not just an action, but it is also a control as well. You can also call it a control. So they can be preventive in nature, in which the objective of those countermeasure is to prevent it, to prevent the attack in the first place. So your first line of defense will be to prevent, right, to prevent an attack to happen, a harmful event to happen. But somehow if your prevention mechanism is not is compromised, for example, then you must go and must have the detection mechanism to detect whether the person or the attacker who has got into, who was not prevented by your preventive mechanisms, and now they are there in your systems or in your network doing some kind of fishy thing, are you able to detect it? So our second countermeasure controls would be for detection. That would be enabling us to detect various kind of threats. Fine. And once you have detected a threat successfully, what should you do about it? Celebrate, right? No, you don't celebrate about it. Once you have detected a threat, you go ahead and respond to it. So these are called reactive controls or corrective controls, which respond to a particular attack that has been detected. Fine. Plus, you must always go and go and seek help from consultants, experts out there, from the law enforcement agencies. We have Oman CERT here. Oman CERT, Oman Computer Emergency Response Teams. Fine, they are also helping you to investigate some of the attacks that has been launched against you. You must go to the forensics experts. Forensics experts are those experts which are active after an attack, after a damage has been done to a system. Fine, and they are brought in order to investigate it. Who has done it, how has it been done, what were the damages, and all. These are all forensic, and to collect evidences actually, maybe to to display or to submit it in the court of law. Security consultants are always there. Fine. They can help you, not for free, of course. There is no such thing as free lunch, as they say. No, there is no such thing as fee sabilillah these days. So for a fee, they may help you into guiding you into investing in the right countermeasure, for example. Security incident response teams they are also known as CERTs. Either these CERTs or this CERTs. These are the teams that will become active when there is some kind of, they will respond to the incident, to the security incident that has been noticed or been conducted in some kind of an organization or information system. How can we counter malwares? These are very generic discussion. First, create a user program. Educate your user to please not to open each and everything, not to visit a particular website which is offering things for free. There is no such thing as free. Fine. So try not to open each and every email, try not to open each and every attachment that is coming from a suspected source, things like that. This is how you should be keeping your password. This should be the maximum length. This should be all these education. You should not be using your helping your friend who is going on a vacation to reply on his behalf. So you have to properly educate them. Okay. Post regular bulletins about malware problems. Let them know what is happening in the recent days. Fine. So if you go to Oman CERT, they are actually on daily basis they are updating these news called bulletins, which helps the interested people, the community out there, to be aware of the current situation. Never transfer a file from an unknown or untrusted source, unless antimalware installed. Your antivirus, even if you are using antivirus, there are techniques like obfuscations and encryption, which can easily fool your antivirus, which can easily bypass your antivirus software. So in the first place, you should try not to go to unknown places, torrents or peer-to-peer networks, to download respective files. Test new programs. Always when you are in bigger organization, when they invest in some new applications, for example, they do not bring and install it. They first test it. Chances are that they may lead to some kind of bugs. Chances are that they may have some kind of security issues. So always test new programs. Open suspect files on a quarantine computer. So if you suspect that these files have a funny look or is not from the right person, make sure that you are opening it in a computer which is isolated from the rest of your network, to make sure that at least it will not spread. Fine. Install anti-malware software. People who do not have anti-malwares or antivirus software installed on their systems, on their computers, they deserve to be attacked. They deserve to be infected. Make sure, and most of them are good. There are Avast, for example. Avast is a very good antivirus program, and it is for free, so why not use it if you are not running a genuine Windows Defender. Make sure it remains current, means that you should be properly updating the antivirus database. Fine. You should have the latest signatures from the respective vendors, and schedule a regular malware scan. It's not like you have updated antivirus and you have installed an antivirus. Fine, it is just for a show if it is only installed. You should make sure that you do frequently scans, weekly or maybe after 2 days, or maybe every day if you are a proper all-time network user. Particularly use secure logon and authentication process. Make sure that you are using a secure logon, means that there must be in the first place you must have a logon procedure, authentication process, right? It should not be open wide for the attacker to come and eat it. But even if you have a logon procedure or authentication procedure, make sure that that is also secured. The information that it is transmitting or processing is also done in a secure fashion. Fine. So these were some guidelines. In this lecture we had a look at the overall threat spectrum, I would say. Fine. So we had a look at attacks, threats, vulnerabilities related to wireless communication, related to web application. We also talked about social engineering related attacks and vulnerabilities, techniques that can be used to gain information, to extract information. So let me know if you have any questions. Fine. Bring it, please read it, understand it. I have provided in the notes section, you can see that there will be some kind of so I have provided you with basic information that you can get started with. But if you want to have more information, you can definitely go out and browse the internet. But this will do, I believe. The video itself, the contents in the video and the notes here will do the job for you. If you still have any confusion, let me know. Okay. Until Wednesday, until our consultation time, stay healthy and stay blessed. Assalamu alaikum.